Jace, for coming, and I'm handing it over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you for having me. Kind of like she said, my name is Jace Mondrell, and I'm a physical therapist at Performance Therapies. So that's on Forever Green Drive in Coralville. So get a lot of people from North Liberty and Coralville and that sort of stuff. So it works out good to be able to talk to you guys, and I appreciate you all taking your time to listen to me. I hope it's not a complete waste of time here for you this afternoon. So
shouldn't be.
Yeah, I sure hope not. So I kind of put together a pretty informal presentation and information here. So if you guys have any questions or anything along the way, feel free to stop me. It's nothing too crazy or anything here. I think quite a bit of information you guys might know already and that sort of stuff, but just hoping to hit on some different things that might help you guys out or give you a little bit more information. So I'm not a Zoom expert by any means, but I'm going to try my best here to split or share my screen. So you guys let me know or give me a thumbs up if that's working. Sec here. All right. Are you guys able to see that?
Yes.
All right. Perfect. So I'll go ahead and get started here. So like I said today, I want to talk about osteoarthritis, and I'm going to focus mostly on knee osteoarthritis just because that's kind of the most common thing that I see. But for sure, you can have arthritis in really any of your joints, whether it be the hips or the fingers or the neck or anywhere. But I would say most commonly seen in the knee. So that's kind of where most of my information focuses on, but there's a lot of carryover to other joints in the body and that sort of thing. So kind of anything I talk about with the knee kind of applies to all the other joints there. So like I said, hopefully applicable to most people and can give you some good information here today. So kind of like I said, working at Performance Therapies, I actually grew up in Northwest Iowa by Sioux City. So then kind of making my way east across the state, I got my physical therapy degree at University of Iowa. So just kind of stuck around in the area after that. So yeah, kind of been a weird time as far as physical therapy goes too, just with, COVID and everything going on. So, it was really slow in the spring and stuff where they weren't doing surgeries and no sports and that sort of stuff. But past few months, we've definitely seen things start to pick up and taking a lot of precautions and that sort of stuff. So I hope that trend continues just to keep me a little busier at work here. So I'll just kind of go through this. And like I said, for sure, go ahead and stop me if there's any questions or anything like that. I'd be more than happy to answer things. So I just kind of put together a why does it matter slide. And I think the big thing is that a fourth of people over the 18 have chronic joint pain. So whether that be, knees, back, hips, ankles, whatever it may be, that's a pretty large portion of the population that does have chronic joint pain. 40% over 65. So that number goes up quite a bit once you hit that 65 age range as far as chronic joint pain. And I would say the large majority, 17%, is knee. So that's kind of why I want to focus on the knee today. That's kind of the biggest area there. And just kind of another statistic is that 19 to 37% of adults have knee osteoarthritis. And that number kind of increases with age. So I think osteoarthritis is one of those things that can be kind of daunting to most people or a kind of scary term, but for sure everybody is going to get osteoarthritis as they age. It's just the way our bodies are made, and just with the activities that we do with walking, standing, that sort of thing, and everybody's eventually going to get arthritis. So I don't think it needs to be a scary term or anything like that, just because anybody that gets x-rays, that sort of thing, probably has some degree of osteoarthritis. I mean, even myself. So the big things is that, you get the limitations in walking, stair climbing, getting up and down from a chair, doing your chores. And I think the biggest thing we see in physical therapy is the recreational activities are limited. So whether that be, playing with grandchildren or golfing, gardening, some of that stuff that, you previously never had pain with, you start to notice a lot of pain and dysfunction. And that's what brings people into physical therapy most often, not just the walking and stair climbing and some of that other stuff. So I definitely think it can be limiting for a lot of people there. So I don't want to overwhelm anybody or, really go into like knee anatomy or anything here, but just what I want to highlight with this slide is that with the knee, it's a pretty complex joint actually, even though you just think of two bones sitting on top of each other. There's a lot going on, within the knee and surrounding the knee that can cause pain and dysfunction and that sort of thing. So you definitely have the two bones that make up the knee, the femur and the tibia, but you have a lot going on in between and around there that can definitely cause people dysfunction and everything too. So, whether it be the true articular cartilage, that would be kind of where my mouse is running here, or whether it be something else around the knee, there's a lot of areas that can give people discomfort and stuff. So I always think it's better to know kind of what's going on than just live with pain and that sort of thing. And then this slide highlights just you have a lot of muscles that run around the knee too. And so you guys are probably familiar with a lot of the big ones like the quads and the hamstrings and the calf, and have heard of a lot of those, but all those kind of run over the knee joint and everything. So those can add to some of the compression that you get at that knee, especially if you're having a lot of tightness, that sort of thing. So that's always something to keep in mind too, is that sometimes it's not even really the knee that's the problem, but it's just all the muscle and stuff that attaches around the knee that's just causing more of that compression on the joint itself. So sometimes just fixing a little bit of mobility with stretching and that sort of stuff can really help eliminate people's pain and that sort of thing. So like I said, I don't kind of want to go into the anatomy and everything, but just want to highlight that there's a lot going on around the knee that can definitely be go wrong or cause people problems, that sort of thing. So I kind of want to talk about what OA is here. So here's a picture that I think describes it pretty well, but the big thing is that you have this articular cartilage that basically is on the end of your bones and really serves every time you step or walk or stand. The articular cartilage is absorbing all that compression, all that force that's coming from the ground. So it's really, really important. But the second that you start walking and standing and that sort of stuff, it starts to wear down. And it's definitely going to wear down as you age. Even like I said, myself, I'm sure I've already started to have some wear down of that articular cartilage and whatnot. So that's kind of the big thing that OA is focusing on.
Is the cartilage, is that like a hard, like a bone, or is it mushy, or is what?
So that's a great question. It's actually pretty firm, but it does have some like compression to it. So it's almost like I would almost describe it as like foam padding that sits on the end of your knee there. So it's not hard like a bone would be, but I kind of like this. I have this little guy here, and this kind of shows the articular cartilage here, but it's almost like a squishy material, but definitely has some tensile properties to it so that it doesn't tear or break down too easily. But for sure, yeah, it doesn't have the same properties as bone, which I think is good, just because basically it protects that bone from constantly getting loading over and over again. So it also helps reduce some of that friction, when you're moving side to side, when you're sitting, that sort of thing, that joint's kind of rubbing over top of each other. So for sure, the articular cartilage helps protect that as well. So like I said, just doing normal human activities, that's going to start to wear down. And so this kind of picture here starts to describe that a little bit. So as that articular cartilage wears down, you start to get more of that bone-on-bone contact, and basically you start to lose some of that cushion and some of that space. And so with that bone contacting each other too, bone kind of develops where some of that articular cartilage would be. So that's why it's really common to see people in physical therapy that maybe have some of those bone spurs where you can feel kind of their knee and stuff, that just that extra bone has grown and stuff there just from that loading and that sort of stuff. So, and then you get that joint narrowing and everything. So this picture is pretty simplistic, but I think it describes pretty well what's going on there. One really interesting thing about articular cartilage, though, is it's not innervated. So there wouldn't be any pain or anything coming from that articular cartilage, but it's really all the areas around that area, kind of like I showed in that first picture, where you have all those different structures in the knee, that sort of thing. So that's really what's giving people pain, when you're feeling your knee hurt, that sort of thing. It's not so much the articular cartilage, but it's some of that bone is highly innervated, some of the different stuff in the joint. You have a lot of pain fibers and stuff too. So as far as articular cartilage, it's really just kind of that foam pad and not really innervated. So you definitely you can imagine, you have a lot of inflammation and that sort of thing in the joint itself or around the joint just from, getting wear down and putting more stress on other areas. So that's kind of what they're referring to with osteoarthritis, is just that wearing down of the articular cartilage there. Next slide here. So kind of why does it occur? One of the largest things is just over time, just the older age is a risk factor. And like I said, that just kind of happens with normal activity and everything like that. So basically everybody is going to get osteoarthritis to some degree. And, some people obviously have it more than others, but that's just something that happens with normal aging, which is unfortunate, but true. Sex, so female genders, they're more predisposed to having some of that osteoarthritis. Bone deformities, so if you have some sort of bone spur or something already in the joint itself, then you can get more of that wear and tear on the cartilage sooner than other people. Joint injury or joint stress is probably one of the biggest factors for that. So if you have a history of like ACL tear, meniscus tear, any sort of previous fracture, anything to that joint, that really increases your chances of osteoarthritis, just because you already have some of that chronic inflammation, some of that poor wearing, that sort of thing. Obesity is a big thing there with that one, just because the heavier you are, the more joint stress, the more joint load you're putting on that knee. So for sure, that's a big one there. And then I guess genetics and sex I put on there twice, but kind of like I said, the female, why that is, I'm not sure, but just they're more predisposed to having that osteoarthritis, and that's kind of all joints, interestingly, not just the knee there. So like I said, these are risk factors for osteoarthritis anywhere, whether it be the hip, the spine, the back, anything like that. So some of those, you can manage a little bit as far as like the obesity and that sort of stuff, but most of it is just, you can't really do too much about it. So that's always one kind of unfortunate thing. So some signs and symptoms to think of when you think of osteoarthritis, I think the biggest one is pain. So as far as what we're seeing in physical therapy, I would say most people are coming in reporting pain, and that's why they're coming in. Like I said, whether it be pain with walking, whether it be pain with golfing, whether it be pain with kneeling in the garden or kneeling with their grandchildren, that's kind of the biggest thing we see there. So for sure, you get that tenderness just poking around that knee. And like I said, you just have a lot of inflammation there just from that poor loading of the knee, and you have a lot of swelling, that sort of stuff. I would say morning stiffness is one of the more common things with osteoarthritis, and I'll kind of talk a little bit later about why that is. But for sure, first thing in the morning, most people complain of just that stiffness. Their knee doesn't move quite as well, but the more they get moving throughout the day, the knee starts to feel a little bit better. So the clicking or cracking with movement, sometimes that can be a little bit of that bone irritation, but anytime you get swelling or anything in any joint, you start to get some of that clicking, that cracking. So that might not necessarily be like the bone on bone. The swelling I kind of talked about. Muscle weakness is a big one, just because those muscles around the joint start to get disinhibited, basically, just with all the inflammation, and they're not working as well. You're not moving as much. So for sure, muscle weakness is a big one. And then occasionally you get some of that joint buckling where, you're walking and you feel like the knee gives out on you. It doesn't necessarily cause you to fall or anything like that, but you just feel a little less stable. And that's kind of a big sign there too. So kind of where I come into play, I think as a physical therapist a lot is keeping people mobile while also minimizing pain. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit today. I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to arthritis or when it comes to joint pain, is that most people want to stop moving or stop doing things because of pain. And a lot of times that's one of the worst things you can do, is to stop moving or stop exercising, stop, your recreational activities for a variety of reasons. So that's kind of where physical therapy comes in, just to help you minimize pain, maybe choose exercises, maybe help you stay mobile a little bit. So I kind of want to cover that today for sure. Was there any questions about that first part there? Not really. Perfect. So kind of going back to that articular cartilage, I noted earlier that it's not innervated, so you don't get those pain fibers. So it's not really causing much pain. Well, at the same time, it's avascular, which means that there's no blood flow going to that tissue. So it can't repair itself. If you break a bone, if you scratch your skin, that sort of stuff, it can repair itself because it has blood flow going to that area. So that's maybe one downfall about osteoarthritis, is that it is progressive. So for sure, if anybody had a cure to osteoarthritis, they'd be, not working here, but living on some private island somewhere or something probably. But there's just no way of reversing that damage to the joint, just that it can't repair itself. So I think that's a really important thing to think about, is you're never really going to change that joint, but you can definitely do things to make it feel better, to make it move better. So
is there like a surgery where they can,
Yes, yeah. So I'll kind of talk about knee
Okay.
replacements at the end. Yeah, but that's a good question. That's kind of the go-to as far as that goes. And yeah, I'll definitely hit on that one. So as far as like the nutrition to the joint, it receives nutrients through diffusion. So basically what that means is there's a lot of fluid sitting in the joint itself. And when that joint is compressed, either if you're standing on it, walking, or with muscle contraction, that fluid is released and absorbed by the cartilage. And then when you unweight that joint or release the muscle, that sort of thing, then the nutrition goes out of the articular cartilage there. So basically what that's meaning is you need some sort of load just to get nutrients to that tissue, just to get blood to that tissue. So that's a big thing. If you're sitting or lying all the time because you're in pain, you're never going to get nutrients to that tissue to make it feel better, to make it move better. So that's the big thing with morning stiffness, is that someone is lying in an unweighted position for so many hours, so that area is never getting nutrition, it's never getting blood flow. So that's a big thing. While you have pain in the morning, stiffness in the morning, well, once you start getting a little bit of load, getting a little bit of compression, that pain starts to go away a little bit. And so that's kind of why that morning stiffness comes into play. So kind of the big thing is that you need some sort of mechanical pressure, whether that be muscle contraction or whether that be loading. But then the total relief of pressure is what's going to inhibit that nutrition from getting delivered. So I think that's the big thing in physical therapy, is just finding activities that still help that joint, but at the same time, not having you completely stay off of it, or else that really hinders everything too. So you kind of mentioned this, but too little activity, you don't get that joint nutrition, you don't get that lubrication. But if you're doing too much activity, then you're just increasing that joint stress. You get that excessive wear and tear to a joint that's already vulnerable, already damaged. And then you start to lose those tensile forces kind of that cartilage. And so then it just doesn't respond as well to compression, respond to movement, that sort of stuff. So I think the big thing is, doing activity that's not too little, but not too much. And so just kind of that fine line of activity is really, really important.
I've done both. And hi, I'm Sue.
Hi, go ahead there.
Hi, I've done both and learned pretty quickly that I need to listen to my body.
For sure. And I would say that, I would say the biggest thing with like arthritis is kind of like you said, just listening to that pain. So a lot of the exercises that we choose in physical therapy are ones that aren't reproducing or recreating pain. So you're just kind of doing that sub-threshold pain where you're not completely not moving. But at the same time, you're not forcing through pain or causing more damage to the joint itself. So yeah, I think that's really important there. So I've put together some slides with different exercises to do, and you guys for sure have my email. So if you ever want like any videos or pictures or anything of these, feel free to let me know. But early on in the PowerPoint, I kind of showed that video or the picture of all the muscles that are around that joint. So kind of like I said, if those are really tight, then you're just increasing that compression on the knee joint itself. So kind of the big goal of physical therapy early on is to identify what causes pain for you, whether it be stairs, whether it be kneeling, that sort of thing. But then first, just freeing up that joint a little bit by just giving you some soft tissue mobility. So like I said, you can't really change the joint itself, but you can change factors to, release some of that stress, or release some of that load on the joint. So this one here is a really good hamstring stretch, and with most people, they never do it where their arms are like behind the knee itself. But if you have like a towel or a dog leash, that usually works really well for people, because then you can just hold it there. But basically all you're doing there is just pumping that lower leg up in the air. So like this would be the starting position, this would be the ending position. But this, you're unweighted, you're unloaded, and you're just working on getting some of that mobility through the hamstring, through the calf. So this is probably a go-to exercise for most people. And I would say even myself, but 99% of people that we see in physical therapy have tight hamstrings to some degree. I wouldn't say stretching is something that most people do consistently, and I totally fall into that boat too. So really common to see the tight hamstrings. And like I said, that just, increases that load on the joint. So that's a really good one for hamstrings. Like I said, if you ever want videos or anything of these, I can definitely show you. I'd show you in person too. It's just a little harder sitting in this little office with Zoom. But the next one is doing a calf stretch, which you guys have probably seen before. But the calf down, on the lower leg actually crosses the knee joint too. So it can be one of those irritating factors also that causes a little more compression on that knee, a little more stiffness. So the calf stretch can be really good just as far as unloading that knee a little bit, and that kind of goes in line with the hamstring stretch. And then the last one I have here, this one's always probably the most challenging to figure out a way to stretch the quad here. So I know a lot of people don't do great lying on their stomach here, but basically getting a stretch through the front side of the leg. Like I said, I just picked this picture because it's probably the most common one we use, but there's a lot of different variations to stretch out the quad without necessarily getting on your stomach or lying on the floor, that sort of thing. But the quad muscle actually, so here's my knee model, but this is the whole quad muscle. So it runs over top the knee and then, lands there on the bottom of the knee joint, like down towards the shin there. So that's a really important one, just because that quad is a really strong muscle. And if it's really tight, then you're definitely adding some compression to that knee. And at the same time with the quad, you have the little patella, which you guys, have probably felt before, know your patella or whatever, but that kind of is engulfed in that quad muscle. So if it's tight, then you just get that patella can be irritated or compressed onto your knee. And so a lot of times that is actually causing more pain and dysfunction than the knee joint itself. But just having that patella like constantly compressed up against the bone of the knee joint can be really painful too. So freeing up that patella, I think, is a good one to do with the quad stretch. And like I said, I can always show you guys different variations of those stretches. I know a lot of people aren't a huge fan of lying on their stomach and that sort of thing, so I totally understand that. So then the next thing I would focus on is strength. And so I think these are...
We have a question from chat. Deb asks, can the quad stretch be done lying on your stomach in bed?
For sure, yeah. So that's how I would recommend doing it actually is in bed there, just because you don't have to kneel down on the floor to get there. And like I said, you can start in the bed for sure. You might not get as good of a stretch, but I think it's still more beneficial than not doing it at all for sure. So I would say most people actually prefer doing it in the bed just because they can do it, first thing in the morning or first thing at night. And that's way easier than getting down on the floor, that sort of thing. And like I said, there's some different variations of that quad stretch too that I can always share with you guys too. That's probably just the most common one there. So then as far as some really good strengthening exercises go, I will say probably one of the biggest things with knee osteoarthritis that we see is weak hips. So if those hips are weak, basically all that load that the hip musculature and the hip joint is supposed to be taking, that's all getting passed to the knee. So a lot of times when someone's coming in with knee pain, that sort of thing, one of the first places I'll look is at their hip range of motion, at their hip strength. So for sure, just giving yourself some hip strength, some hip stability, you're going to take a lot of load off that knee joint. And if you have that knee osteoarthritis, like I said, that's not necessarily something that's going to change, but you can make it a lot better by making your hip stronger. That way the hip is taking a lot of that load and the knee is not taking as much load. So these first three exercises are all really good for hip musculature. most people usually tolerate them pretty well because you're not really in a weighted position. So, and all these you can do in bed. And I would say most people do in bed, like first thing in the morning, that sort of thing, just to get things warmed up a little bit before getting out of bed. So just doing the straight leg raise can be more of a challenging one, but you can always bend your knee so that it makes it a little easier. You're just taking away some of the lever arm there. But these are kind of 3 exercises that I would say almost everyone with knee osteoarthritis can benefit from to strengthen the hips, just so that knee is taking less of a load. So on here, I have the straight leg raise, doing a bridge. And then this exercise is called a clamshell, but it's a really good exercise for your glutes too. So you kind of feel it in those hip muscles here. And like I said, all of these can be done in bed. They're all pretty low level. So those are all kind of 3 exercises that I would say most people get started with. And I feel like most people don't feel pain with these exercises because you're in an unweighted position. So, you're not walking, you're not standing, that sort of thing. So they can be a great way to strengthen the hips without giving you pain. So these are 3 I would kind of recommend. Like I said, I can always send videos or these over to you if you guys are ever interested. And then as far as this last one goes, it's called a quad set, but kind of like I said, you get that contraction around the knee, and that can help with some of that diffusion. So basically just getting nutrition to that knee joint itself. So this one, basically all you're doing is lying down and tightening that quad muscle there, trying to press your knee downward. So you're basically just tightening your quad, but that muscle contraction running across the knee there can be really good just for getting some of that nutrition, that sort of stuff. So this one might look a little complicated, but it's really pretty easy. You're just kind of working on pressing down that leg into the bed, into the floor, that sort of thing, and just working on some of that muscle contraction around the joint to give you basically just a little bit more nutrition to that inflamed joint itself. So like I said, I think the big thing is choosing exercises that don't cause pain. So most of these hip exercises are really, really great. And, they just take some of that load off the knee joint and put more load on the hips, which should theoretically be really strong just because, that's kind of a important area of our bodies. And then the last exercises I have here, I would say these are definitely more later on in physical therapy. I would probably get to these. They're all weighted, as you can see. So, your feet are fixed on the ground, which always kind of can lead to discomfort or lead to symptoms and stuff. However, they're the most functional because every time you stand up or sit down, you're basically doing a squat. Every time you're walking, you're having to strain that knee, just like this exercise is here. So you have to get that knee straight in a fixed position or closed chain position. And then stairs, doing step ups, step downs, you're probably doing really frequently throughout the day. If your laundry's in the basement or if you're stepping up on curbs, that sort of thing. So with all these exercises, they're more functional. So in physical therapy, that's what we try to get people to, is starting, with the exercises on the bed, but then progressing them to the exercises, on the ground, just because that's what you're doing during the day. Most people aren't just sitting or lying in bed, which I definitely wouldn't encourage either. So all of these exercises are good because you have some, support of your hands there. So, if you're doing a mini squat, you can always hold on to a countertop or hold on to your couch, and that helps unload things a little bit too. But just working on strengthening, once again, some of these hip muscles that run around the knee. And then this, like I said, this middle one's important just for walking mechanics. You want to try to get your knee as straight as you can, or else you start to walk with that limp, which I would say is another characteristic of people with more severe osteoarthritis, is you start to get that limp just because that knee mobility is gone. So just trying to work on a little bit of mobility before that knee starts to lose it. And then the step ups and step downs, kind of like we do in physical therapy, I would start with, maybe a short step and using 2 hands for support, and then using, progressing that to using 1 hand for support, and then being able to go up without using any arms, that sort of thing. So I think if you're ever doing these at home, I would start, with just holding on, making things really basic, and then kind of making things or progressing to harder positions from there. So like I said, kind of 3 pieces, starting with the mobility exercises, in physical therapy, doing a lot of hands-on stuff to help loosen up the musculature around the knee, progressing to some light strengthening, getting those muscles working again, strengthening the hips, and then progressing to more of those functional activities that you're doing every day, the sit to stands or the mini squats, the step ups, and then doing some of those knee exercises here. And then lastly, I want to talk briefly about knee replacement. So Angela kind of asked earlier, if there's any surgery or anything that can be done. And I would say we do see a lot of total knee replacements, and it's for people that are having a lot of pain when they're walking or when they're moving. And I would say they're really great surgeries. They work really well for people. And there's some really phenomenal surgeons in this area that do knee replacements. So I definitely think it's a good option for people that are having a lot of pain and knee mobility issues. So it's $11 billion a year industry, and that was in 2009. I would guess even more now. So that just basically shows you that they're doing a lot of knee surgeries. That's a really common thing. So real quick, I just want to talk about probably like realistic expectations. Is probably the thing we see. So when you get your knee replaced, you come to physical therapy pretty consistently. And you're working kind of on the mobility, getting that mobility back in, that strength back, that sort of thing. Early on, people do have a lot of pain after that surgery just because it's a pretty aggressive. So basically what they're doing is they're going in and cutting off the ends of that knee joint, the bones basically. So you're cutting off the end of the femur, you're cutting off the end of the tibia, and then replacing that with metal. So that it slides easier and moves better. So you're getting rid of the articular cartilage. So as far as the surgery goes, they're basically, cutting off the end of your bone and then putting in those metal pieces. So early on, people do have a lot of pain and a lot of mobility deficits, but it gets better for sure. So I think just being realistic, if you do go through the knee replacement, that sort of thing, knowing that early on, you're going to have pain just because it's a pretty aggressive surgery. But once you get over that hump of having pain and whatnot, people do move really well and they get back to doing what they want to do. So I think just early on, just knowing that you're going to have some of that pain and limitation is important. But like I said, it gets better for sure. And that's kind of what we do in physical therapy a lot, is help people with those joint replacements get back to functioning. So I just want to finish. This is just kind of another simplistic picture, but kind of shows what's going on there. So you have that joint that's all beat down. It's not moving well. There's a lot of friction, a lot of swelling, and they're replacing that with the metal pieces, which theoretically should slide pretty smooth and work pretty well. So once you have that knee surgery, you can't really do any damage to the knee joint because your joint is now metal, which isn't really gonna, wear or tear or do anything there. So like I said, early on, you just have the pain from surgery, a lot of tight muscle, that sort of stuff. But after surgery, things do get, a lot better, and people typically move a lot better. I always hope to, prolong that surgery as much as possible, just doing, the physical therapy and everything beforehand. But for a lot of people that are in a lot of pain and have a lot of joint arthritis, the surgery does work well for people. So there is always, another option there too. So I think I put in some resources here that I used for my different slides there. But other than that, I'll stop sharing my screen. And if you guys have any questions or anything for me, I can definitely field those. And if not, that's okay too. But if there's no questions, like I said, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment, after a total knee, continue to do your exercises.
That's true. That is very good advice. Yes.
Even if you're moving well, and that is the most common thing that people will say that have had that done. Make sure you're doing your exercises, and it's a true story.
Yep, I would agree with that. That is very important. Yeah, just continuing that consistency with the exercise. Yep.
I fell on the ice twice this winter. but then the corona, or I'm sorry, the COVID
Mm-hmm.
interrupted seeing a doctor. I was finally able to at least get his impression. So it doesn't feel any better.
Yeah.
But my range of motion is good.
Yeah, and with COVID, the knee replacement was like a non-essential surgery, so they didn't really do those for several months. So now, like with summer starting, they've really picked that up. So they are doing a lot more and that sort of stuff. But I think there was a lot of people that were having pain or they were scheduled for knee replacement that it got pushed back just because they were doing essential surgeries only, which I understand too. But so yeah, I think there's a lot of people that were in kind of those shoes. I saw a chat, someone asking about is
Deb
the knee
asks,
replacement.
Is knee replacement a permanent fix or limited?
So I would say it is a permanent fix. There's some research on there that that metal will wear down after like 30 some years or something like that, like 25 years, kind of depends on the company. So I don't think there's too many people that are outliving the joint replacement there. So once that's in, it's a pretty permanent fix. It takes a lot to do damage to that metal that's in there pretty secure. And so I would say that's a permanent fix there.
Is there a nutritional component of maybe retaining some of the cartilage?
Yes.
Like, is there like collagen if you took it daily that would help keep that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different supplements out there, and I haven't personally seen great information towards one versus the other. But I think there's a ton of research going into that right now. One is how to kind of either replace that cartilage or get that cartilage to last longer, just because everybody has cartilage deficits. So it's kind of something that if they figure out, they can do really well with. So there is different supplements out there. I guess I don't know enough to make recommendations to anybody about the different supplements, but that's definitely something, you could always talk to your doctor about or talk to a nutritionist and that sort of thing. I guess I haven't personally seen a lot of research that, there's one better than the other. There's one that's doing great or that sort of thing. But there are things that can make people feel better for sure.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey there.
Welcome. Sue was raising her hand. Do you have another comment or question?
Also, there are particular foods to eliminate that will cause inflammation. Tomatoes, are they Jace? Are they nightshades? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm not for sure. I think, kind of like you said, there's a lot. So kind of with a lot of foods like sugars, processed foods, that sort of thing, they're pro-inflammatories. So kind of like you said, a lot of anti-inflammatory type foods can be really good. And I guess
potatoes.
Yeah.
Peppers. I'm not sure about avocados.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I don't have a ton of information that, I know kind of some basics about foods and stuff, but for sure, like, your local nutritionist or someone like that might have a better understanding of some of those exact foods that can be good for people there.
There's another chat question. Sorry.
No problem.
Why does my neck creak and crack when I roll my head in a circle?
So tough to say for sure, but kind of like I said, that's something that could be investigated a little more, but kind of like that osteoarthritis, I said, can be any joint in the body. So you think about your neck, you have 7 joints that make up your cervical spine. So potentially some, osteoarthritis going on there. So you get some of those symptoms, whether it be the pain or the cracking, that sort of thing. Tough to say for sure, just based off of that. But like I said, that's definitely an option. Kind of like I said, that osteoarthritis, you have a ton of joints in the body and kind of all of them can be susceptible to osteoarthritis. So that would be my best guess just based off that information, but kind of hard to know for sure. It's got to kind of be a little bit annoying though, I would think.
Ace, I have a question that has to do between the knee and the neck.
Yes.
When a person has L4-5 stenosis, are there exercises that can be done for that?
There certainly is. Yes. I could give a whole nother lecture on that. Yes. So, yeah, there's basically with the stenosis, going into a backwards bend or what's called trunk extension is the exercises that you want to try to avoid. So most of the time, I wish I had a spine model or else I could show you a little bit more, but most of the time, someone going into more of a forward bend helps relieve some of that pressure of the stenosis. So like I said, you could for sure email me and I could send you some stuff over that might be beneficial, or you could come visit me. But there certainly are exercises for stenosis, and I would say that's a very, very common thing that we see in physical therapy is low back pain due to stenosis. So I think for sure.
And when I post or when I send out the email with the link for the video, if you want to revisit this, I'll include Jace's contact information again. But it's also on our Facebook post as well.
Yeah, I think I saw it on the Facebook thing there. But
Marilyn has a comment that she had a knee replacement and she's glad to hear it'll last a long time. So she wrote down your exercises. She's gonna pass.
Perfect, yeah. And you could continue with all those exercises. It would be great to do even if you've had a knee replacement. So
yeah, like Sue said, keep going with
keep going. That's right. Yes. Yep. Keep going.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, for sure.
I have had a lot of ortho difficulties, and of course want to stay away from opioids. I've got addictions in my family, and I took an 8-week course on pain psychology, and for about 4 months I had almost no pain. I'm talking more about my low back, and for weeks and weeks prior to that, my pain level was 10. And that class made a significant difference in the way I was thinking about pain.
Yeah, I will make one.
Was that through a physical therapist, or?
I'm sorry.
Was it done through a physical therapy office, or?
It was done through a physical medicine and rehab program, pain program.
Yeah, those can be really good. A lot of people live with chronic pain, and just understanding it a lot of times and the way you think about it can help a lot. So I'm definitely glad you did that. And I'm glad it worked too.
Yeah, Sue, if you have a web page for that group or the organization that did that, I can share that too. If they have upcoming classes. Sounds interesting.
I would say Blue Ribbon.
Okay.
For them. Sterling.
All right. Do we have any more questions? If not, thank you so much, Jace, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was fun. I appreciate you.
I have all kinds of things that I have visited a physical therapist for in my life, and I appreciate the work you guys do. So
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, like I said, feel free to reach out if anyone has any more questions or anything. And if not, thank you for your time and have a good weekend. And stay healthy too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see you.
Stay healthy. Wear your mask.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Bye-bye.